Warren family. Glad to be back with you again this week as we draw together even while we're apart. And we're continuing our month on gratitude and generosity. Remember, gratitude is giving thanks and generosity is giving back. And today, I want to tell you something I'm thankful for. It's kind of funny. Today, I'm thankful for corn. Now, I didn't have any fresh corn. I only had frozen corn in my freezer. But I'm thankful for corn. And that might seem like kind of a silly thing to be thankful for, right? Like, it's just food. And it's not a very exciting food at that, is it? But I want to tell you something about why corn is a symbol for things that I think we really need to be more thankful for. So this is the month of November, right? And at the end of this month, we celebrate Thanksgiving. That first feast when the Pilgrims and the Native Americans came together and they shared a meal. Well, one of the main foods that they shared at that meal was corn. And guess what? When the Pilgrims came to the United States from Europe, they had never even heard of corn before. They had never seen it before because it didn't grow in Europe. They didn't even know what it was. And they got here and they were having a really hard time figuring out how to grow things and how to feed their families. And so the native people that lived here introduced the Pilgrims to corn. This was a crop that the native people had grown for thousands of years. They knew all about it. They knew how to grow it. They knew how to pop it. They knew how to grind it into meal and bread. It was a very basic and important staple in their lives. Now, the Native Americans could have said, nope, we're not going to share with you. This is ours. You came here, you messed up our lifestyle. We're not going to share. But instead, the native people were generous and they gave corn to the Pilgrims. And then the Pilgrims learned how to grow it themselves. And guess what? Today, corn makes up about a third of the products in our grocery stores. If you think about it, corn tortillas, cornbread, cornmeal, corn flakes. Even in a lot of the foods we eat, there's a sweetener called corn syrup. Maybe you like Doritos or Fritos or Takis. They're all made out of corn. And so this simple little thing that seemed like no big deal to the Native Americans became a really big deal to lots of people around the world. In fact, the Pilgrims took the corn back to Europe and taught them how to plant and grow it. So if it weren't for the generosity of the native people, then there wouldn't be corn today. Now, you might think, Mrs. Burke, this is such a boring lesson. Why do we care about corn? Well, today we're going to paint corn. And not just any old corn, we're going to paint something called Indian corn. This is a special kind of corn that comes in all sorts of different colors. Check out some pictures of real Indian corn. Isn't it pretty? It almost looked like jewels or gems. And so today, we're going to create some really colorful Indian corn as well. If you look at my piece with me, you'll notice that I have pretty much every color in the rainbow. My central stalk is mostly what we would call warm colors, reds and oranges and yellows. This stalk of corn is mostly cool colors. I've got a lot of purples and blues. And then this stalk over here has got a lot of greens. Still has some yellows and some oranges and some purples in it. But we're going to create this together. We're going to do it using just some of our very basic artist tools and some very basic drawing shapes. We're going to draw some ovals, some lines, and then I'm going to teach you a couple of new watercolor techniques as we paint our corn. So pause the video, grab your paper, your Sharpie, a pencil if you want it, your watercolors and watercolor brush, and a little jar of water, and let's get making some corn. Let's take a look at our inspiration painting for today, just so we can make a little plan together. So we're going to do 3 stalks of corn, and you'll notice that the corn is made up of all the little tiny kernels. So let's look at some of our basic shapes. The corn cob itself is just a big, long oval. You'll notice that it's a little bit pointier at the bottom, so it's almost like a big, long teardrop. And there are 3 of them. And then our corn stalks are like big flames that come out of the top, almost like ovals, but with points. You'll also notice that there's something called overlapping in this piece. That means that this stalk of corn is in front of this stalk, and so they overlap. It's also in front of this stalk. Or I guess, is that called a stalk or an ear? I'm not exactly a corn expert. But this one is on top of this one. And there's also some overlapping in the husks. So this husk is in front, and then there are some peeking out from behind. And I'm going to show you how to do all of that. So grab your blank piece of paper and grab your pencil. I'm using one of the pencils that we made at the very beginning of the year. And I'm going to go about halfway down my paper and to start my first oval. You guys are going to want to draw this very lightly. I'm going to draw mine pretty dark so you can see it on the camera. You're going to want to just lightly touch your paper, but I'm going to draw my center oval, and remember it gets narrower at the bottom and then comes back up at the top. Now, this doesn't have to be perfect, right? Then I'm going to draw the next ear of corn, and because it overlaps, I'm going to come over to the side, come back up. Now, if I wanted to, it would come up behind there, but I'm not going to draw that part because it's behind this one. I'm going to do the same thing over here. This one I think I'm going to make a little bit higher. Another oval down to the side, a little narrow at the bottom, and then come back up. Then I'm going to draw the places for my husks. The husks grow first out of the middle of the top of the corn. So I'm going to draw the one in front first. I'm going to just come up with a wiggle, 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 wiggle to the top of my paper. And where I reach the top there, let's see, can we see that? I'm going to make a little point, almost like the top of an A, and then I'm going to wiggle back down. I'm going to do the center husk on this one as well, and it's going to overlap. It's going to go behind this one. I might make it peek out on this side and do another little A, and then I'm going to wiggle it back down. And then I'm going to come back up here with a point at the top, wiggle, wiggle, wiggle back down. Now, each of those corn cobs has several husks coming out of the top, so I can just draw some more. Starting again in the center of the tops of my husks, I'm going to come up and I'm going to wiggle. I might make one bend. Notice how my lines wiggle up to a point and then come back. Some of them I might imagine start behind the husks. So I'm going to make some more here. You can draw them so they overlap if you want. And then you could come back in and erase those parts if you want. My eraser is hiding, so we'll just leave that like that. Instead of drawing them so that they overlap like that, that can get a little bit confusing. So I'm going to go and just draw mine like this. Then we're going to draw the individual kernels of corn. Notice how they arrange themselves on the ears of the corn. All they are rows or columns. We'll call these columns because they go up and down. Columns of ovals stacked on top of one another. And the way that we're going to create this is on each ear of corn, we're going to start by drawing our center column first. Notice that the ovals are bigger, and then they get smaller as they go down to the bottom. So we'll start by making a center column, and then we'll make columns on either side. So let's start with this one. Now here's where you can go ahead and just work in Sharpie here. Remember, your pencil lines should be much lighter than mine, and we're going to erase the pencil at the end anyway. I'm going to go ahead and just start making my column of ovals, and we want these to be nice and big. Don't make little teeny tiny corn kernels, because it will make your painting take way too long and it just won't be as fun. So don't be afraid to do nice big corn kernels. And see how I'm going? And now I'm going to start getting just a little bit smaller as I get to the bottom. So I made my central one here. Now I'm going to fill in with columns of ovals on either side. You can go ahead and start your kernels as you watch me. Now that I've finished that central ear of corn, I'm going to do the same thing on the other two. I'm going to start with a central row or central column right down the middle of each one, and then I'm going to add columns on the side. Now that my kernels are all finished, I'm going to work on my husks. And it's the same thing. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to trace over these, but then I'm going to add some lines, because if you've seen corn husks, you know that they have almost a really rough texture. They have lines that go all the way through them. Now here's where I got in trouble when I decided to draw my overlap. I've got to decide which is in the front. So I'm going to just say that this guy is in the front and this guy's poking up out of the back. And we'll erase some of those lines right before we paint. So go ahead, trace your husks, add some lines. They can be broken lines, which are like dashes, or they can be full lines like that. Now that we've got our corn all drawn, grab an eraser, get rid of your pencil lines, and then we'll start to paint. I'm just finishing up erasing my extra little bits of lines, and then I'm going to be ready to paint. All right, good enough. Let's get rid of that little guy right there. Brush off all those little bits of eraser, and now the fun part begins. We're going to just talk a little bit about our watercolor paints and how in watercolor painting, we always go from light to dark. So we put light colors down first, and those are usually pretty watery. Then if you want darker colors, you come back and add more paint on top. So if you can see here,
There are some light kernels and some dark kernels. See that light red and then some darker red, some light orange and darker orange, light green and darker green. And the way that we achieve that is by doing layers of watercolor paint. So we always, always, always start with the light first. I'm going to do, in this painting, I did my center ear with the warm colors. And so I think I'm going to do the same on this one. I'm going to start with a light yellow. I'm going to get my brush nice and wet. I'm going to swirl it around in my paints, but not a ton. I want more water than paint. And I'm just going to come through, I might even add a little bit more water because more water makes for lighter. I'm just going to come through, and because we have Sharpie on our page, it's not going to run anywhere. I'm going to just come through and dab some of the areas of my corn in this light yellow. You could even do a row like this. You just don't want to get the whole thing. Then I'm going to pick another warm color. I'm going to pick some orange, and I'm going to come through and do some light orange. Am I being really particular about how my paint goes on the paper? Absolutely not. I might even take some of that orange and put it over on top of some of the yellows. And another warm color that I'm going to choose, I'm going to take a little tiny bit of red. Not a lot, because red's a strong color, and so I only want little bits of it when I'm trying to go light. But I'm going to do all of my lights on my warm ear of corn. Okay, I'm going to leave that like that right now. While that layer of light paint is drying, I'm going to move and I'm going to do my cool colors. My cool colors are going to be my blues and purples, and I'm going to just do the same thing, adding bits of blue, just some, and I'm using that real light aqua blue that we have in our paint set, just dabbing some light color. And remember, I could even take a little whole row right here, just dabbing some of that light blue. We have two blues in our paint set. We have this more royal blue over here. So I'm going to add some of those. Now that's much darker. I'm going to do a little trick here. If I get too much color, I can go into the lid of my paint and kind of swish it around and add a little bit more water. The more water you have, the lighter your color will be. So I'm going to come back in here, add a little bit of that blue. And just for fun, let's look at this. See how on this ear of corn, I just added a couple of surprise bits of yellow. Remember those initial pictures that we saw? There were surprise bits of color in places. I might add just a few of those. While I've got the yellow on my brush, I might go ahead and just add a few of those surprise bits of yellow over there. I'm going to now add some purple. Remember, I want that nice and light. So this is my cool color. Corn cob. Just want to make sure that I get paint covering all of my cobs, and it's okay to do a little bit of purple over some of the blues. It makes kind of a neat color. All right, so we've got the light color on our center, the light color on our right, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do the same thing I did here, where I'm going to do mostly some greens, but you can see this one is a little bit interesting too. There's yellows and oranges and greens. So I'm going to take the lights of those and fill in this one. So we already did a few yellows. I might do just a few more. Then we have two greens. We have this brighter spring green, and then we have a darker grass green, and I can use both of those on here. Just again, lightly dabbing. Why don't you watch me or grab your colors and get all your light colors on your corn too. We want to add our light color to one more spot. We want to add the light color to our corn husks. And I'm going to choose that light yellow just like I did in my first ear of corn. Quite a bit of water. And just see how I'm loosely just going in the direction of my lines. Just adding a little bit of light color. That means watery color. Sometimes I just go back and dip my brush in my water and not back in my paint. Sometimes I'll do a little paint and a little water, but we want to just stay nice and light. Okay, so now we have all of our light colors done. Now we get to add some more intense colors, and this is where you can just really have a lot of fun. Couple of things that you can do, and I'll show you on here, and then I'll do it on the art project for today. If you notice, let's look at these two kernels. You can tell that I put the light color down first, and then I did kind of just around the side and the bottom, I did the darker color. What that does is it gives that corn kernel a little bit of a 3D look. Looks like the light is shining here and that we have shadow down here. So if you want to be super intentional, super fancy, you can go back. Whoopsies, that brush had way too much water on it. See how it pooled like that? I didn't really want that. So I can come back and get rid of some of that paint on some of my other kernels. But look at that. Now that I'm adding a second layer, I'm getting a darker color. If I want to be more intentional than that, if I want to make just the bottom part darker, maybe a little bit of the side part, it will give it a little bit of 3D. So I'm going to come back and in this middle cob, see how my colors are so much darker? I'm not using as much water at all. And just on a few of the kernels, I'm coming back and adding some more. You can see here that I mixed some purple and red, and I added those. I even snuck in a couple of greens just for fun. I'm going to do that on all three husks. I'm going to go back and just have fun adding these little gems of darker color. Why don't you do the same? Have a lot of fun. Make these look like sparkly corn gems, and then we'll get back together. Our corn cobs are done, and now let's just have a little bit of fun with our husks. You can see here that I added some shading on my corn husks. So any place where the husk came down and connected with the corn, it's gonna be a little bit darker and a little bit shadier. So I added some purple there. You could add blue or purple or a little bit of green, just a darker color there. And then I just had fun and added a few more darker shades of reds and oranges and yellows in the lines of my husks. Again, going in the same direction as the lines that I drew. Join me as we do that together. Now you could leave your painting just like that. I think they look fabulous like this. Or you can add just a little bit of background color. I thought it might be fun to just take a little bit of that light blue, the aqua, and I made it just with a really wet paint, just went loosely around the outside of my painting. You could really choose any color you want. I think for this one, I might go, I don't know, maybe with a light red. I guess you'd call that pink. There we go, all finished. Isn't that interesting? It gives it kind of a different look when you put a cool background color or a warm background color. They both look great, but they just have a different look to them.
I hope you had fun painting corn today. But not only fun painting corn, I want you to actually think about corn. And maybe not even really corn. But what are some things in your own life that you have that you could share with other people? And maybe it's not even things. Maybe you're really good at math and you have a brother or a sister or a cousin who's having kind of a hard time. Could you share some of your math help with them? Or maybe there's somebody in your life that has shared something with you over and over and over again. Maybe your mom or your grandma always makes delicious food for you. Something that maybe you haven't even thought about and we kind of take for granted. Do you think you could say thank you to them for sharing their corn with you? That's my challenge for you this week. I want you to think about something that you have, like the corn, that you could share. And then I want you to thank somebody for something that they've shared with you. I'm thankful for you guys, and thankful for the time that you spend with me each week as we draw together, even when we're apart.